Welcome to Inside Athletic Training, a podcast from the Professional Baseball Athletic Trainer Society. Joining us on the show today is Tony Leo, the Assistant Athletic Trainer for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Tony is currently in his fourth season as the Pirates' Assistant Athletic Trainer. Prior to joining the Pirates, he spent the 2020 season with the Oakland Athletics as their Infection Control and Prevention Coordinator. He began his career in baseball, spending 23 years with the Minnesota Twins organization. Enjoy the show. All right, Tony, welcome to the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. We are super excited to have you on for episode 71 of the show. You're currently in your fourth season as the Assistant Athletic Trainer with the Pittsburgh Pirates organization after spending a couple of decades in the Minnesota Twins organization, which we'll get into in a bit here. We'll talk all things your career and your current role with the Pirates in a bit. But first, we like to start the show by giving our guests a bit of time to share a little about your background and what paths led you to where you are today. So if you don't mind, share with the listeners, where are you from? Were you into sports or anything like that growing up? And also how you found your passion for athletic training and sports medicine.
Oh, sure, Sam. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to do this podcast with you. But, part of my background where I started from and grew up was from Salem, Ohio, which is in Northeast Ohio. It's south of Youngstown, Ohio. And kind of the easiest way to find it on a map is it's about 90 minutes away from Pittsburgh and 90 minutes away from Cleveland. And if you kind of drew a straight line between those cities, it's pretty close to the western PA border here in where I grew up in Ohio. I went to high school there, moved on to Bowling Green State University to get my degree. As far as playing sports growing up, much like most kids, I played baseball, basketball, soccer growing up. From there, my passion for athletic training really came, it's kind of unique in 1990, 91, I think it was. I think it was right before my junior year in high school. They made an announcement, and it was over, our speaker system at school. If anybody had interest in going to an athletic training symposium that was being put on by the University of Pittsburgh. At this time, I really didn't have any idea what athletic training was. I didn't know what an athletic trainer did, what entailed their job, how they went about their business. Mm-hmm. I was familiar with physical therapy. My dad was an auto worker, but, we grew up in a small town. My neighbor was the orthopedic surgeon. So I've always had an interest in medicine. And there, what I learned at the symposium that Pitt put on was that, wow, you can sit there and help people heal, evaluate injuries, get to work on the sidelines. You get to, do all these things and work with athletes and help them return to sport. And that was pretty interesting. And one of the speakers that day happened to be one of the Pittsburgh Steelers athletic trainers who talked about his career. Now he got excited, and it was like, that was really my first introduction to being an athletic trainer. And I was like, wow, that seems pretty interesting. That seems pretty cool. Maybe that's the way I need to go. Instead of being trying to go to med school and everything else, mm-hmm. It's like I can work directly with athletes, yet still be a part of the medical field and combine a passion of mine, which is sports, and kind of work together and do it. And that's kind of how I got introduced to it. And I spent a couple of years while I was still playing sports in high school, helping out with one of our former coaches that was an athletic trainer at the time. Obviously, the structure back then and licensure and everything else that we do now wasn't quite there yet. The career was still advanced. The field was still advancing. So I helped in the training room there when I wasn't playing sports, and kind of grew that passion, and decided that when I enrolled at Bowling Green, that was one of the reasons I went there, was to get my degree become an athletic trainer.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I feel like you, compared to most, got an early education in the profession, which is super cool. And obviously, for many of us, it's a great way to stay in sports, because obviously the athletic abilities we're all blessed with are not what it takes to play at that final next level. So really cool to hear you got that start pretty early. I do want to talk about your education. You mentioned Bowling Green State University with a degree in athletic training. A lot of our guests and your colleagues across the league have talked about how important education is in athletic training, learning the anatomy at first, and really getting your start there. When you're at college and studying to be an athletic trainer in sports, What was most important for you? Was it the hands-on experience? Was it learning from mentors or professors? Was it the textbook stuff? Where did you gain the most knowledge throughout your college experience?
Well, I think like a lot of my colleagues across the league have said, the textbook stuff, the formal education, if you will, to learn your basics and your foundational knowledge that you need to have to advance your career and just to become an athletic trainer is extremely important. What I found that have always been a much better hands-on learning kind of person. That kind of learning structure really suits me and really engages me and really helps me to comprehend, what I'd be learning in the mornings in the classwork and then be able to see it actually applied in the training room. So for me, it was a lot of hands-on experience. I mean, I pretty much lived in the training room back then.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked mainly, my experience was with football, baseball, and hockey is where I collected all my hours before I sat for my exam. And I took advantage of that. I was very fortunate to have, Bowling Green was, it's still not a huge Division I university by any means. We certainly had a lot of sports, but at the time there was only 3 athletic trainers on staff. Bill Jones was the head athletic trainer. Mike Massaro and Annette Davidson were the assistant athletic trainers, and we didn't have any grad assistants. So it presented a unique experience. What I observed early on is, as beginnings, like you would see all these upperclassmen that had shown and demonstrated knowledge, ability, could make good decisions and earn the trust of the full-time staff to be able to do things a little bit more on their own and kind of bridge the gap from being just a student athletic trainer in your undergrad, but also a little bit of taking on some of those roles that, a lot of my peers experience as a graduate assistant.
Mm-hmm.
So that allowed for a lot of learning, a lot of uniqueness. And because you're doing that, you got not only just learning how to interact with players, to learn to build those relationships, to learn how to get them to trust you that you're there for them and that you're going to be able to help them. But with coaches, you'd be put out on kind of working on a team on your own, but you had to start learning how to communicate with the coaching staff about what the players were injured, about how, what the restrictions were, as they were coming back from an injury. You had to learn to work with your team physicians. So it became an all-encompassing type of education for me, where you certainly had the formal education that progressed right alongside with real-world application and seeing it. And for me, I just feel like I was very fortunate to have an full-time athletic training staff that were very open, very giving, always wanted to answer your questions, and just were there to help you become better and give you the proper feedback you need, proper instructions. Sometimes had to really, some of us back in, because we were getting a little bit too far out of where we should be at that moment in time of our learning period. So yeah, it worked out great. I mean, I loved it. You're traveling hockey by myself, which was a rarity until football season got over.
Sure.
You learn to have faith in yourself as an athletic trainer, which I think just paid off a lot for when, as you transition to actually having to work, you go to the minor leagues first time, it's like, well, here you go. Now it's just you. So yep. I was very fortunate in my time at Bowling Green and everybody that poured into me with their teachings.
Yeah, that's a super interesting story, and a couple things from that answer that I want to kind of dive into more. First, you mentioned the different sports you worked in college, from hockey, football, baseball, probably a couple others. When you were in college and getting out of college, finishing up your degree, were you certain that baseball was going to be the sport for you, or were you kind of interested in just landing your first job in professional sports?
Actually, I was more focused on becoming a grad assistant and getting my master's. I never kind of went that route because I got involved in baseball right away. But that was really my focus was, okay, I finished it. I was a December of 96 graduate from DG. It's okay, I need to figure out what to do next. Okay, I need to start putting everything together to apply for grad school, get a grad assistantship. And my focus was to do that, to work in the collegiate athletics, and hopefully work my way up to working football at a big D1 school. I love watching football. Where I grew up in northeastern Ohio and western Pennsylvania, it's a big football area. That was really what I was hoping to do. But at the time, and this is really kind of how I got my start in baseball, we had a spring trip in the spring of 96 or not yet, spring of 96 down, which I was with the baseball team in Fort Myers, Florida. On the last day we played the Twins rookie ball team before we departed to go north to resume our season, back north. And during that time, I was like, I need an internship to finish off my degree for the whole semester, in the fall. And I was talking to one of the trainers there, and he said, well, we have an internship, but it's full. But why don't you send me your resume anyways? Because you never know what's going to happen. I said, okay. So in the meantime, I finished out my degree at Westminster College as an intern, which is up here north of Pittsburgh. And about Thanksgiving, they called me up and said, hey, do you want to do an internship next year? I was like, well, yeah, I have nothing going on in the spring and summer. And with that, I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a great thing to do because I have nothing else planned yet. I'm thinking grad school doesn't start till the fall. Mm-hmm. And so I did extended spring training in the Gulf Coast League down with the Twins in Fort Myers. And what that did was like, wow, I really like doing this. And that's was really my first full introduction to what being a professional baseball athletic trainer was through my internship with the Twins. And I was just fortunate enough, I was sending all my resumes to all the 29 other clubs that had openings at the time and trying to get some things figured out. And I think about 5 days later, the Twins called and offered me a full-time position with them in the minor leagues, which I gladly accept. And then that really began my journey. It just changed the direction of what I thought I was going to do. And this is what I ended up doing. Because at the time I was like, well, professional sports are really hard to get into. That's probably not a realistic goal. And I need to be a little bit more realistic because I need to make some money and get a job. But that's just kind of how everything unfolded.
Yeah. And you mentioned another thing that I thought was super interesting. The real world application, number one, belief in yourself and faith that you can do the job. When you get, you're out on a minor league affiliate by yourself or traveling with hockey teams by yourself in college. There's a trust in your skills and a feel for what you're doing that you can only get through that real world application, like you said. So when you got to the minor leagues with the Twins, it can be such a grind and a learning experience. Share with us a little about those early days with Minnesota, key lessons you learned, kind of fears and apprehension when you're the only guy out there and it's a first year for you. What was that like as a really young guy in the organization?
It's overwhelming. I mean, to be honest, it's an overwhelming experience that you're going to be entrusted. I think our roster, we were carrying 34 players up in the Appalachian League, which was a short season team. I was in Elizabethton, Tennessee. And all of a sudden, you're the go-to for that. Now, much different from what we see now of how all the organizations structure their minor leagues and what they do for player development. What at the time, it was the manager, the pitching coach, the hitting coach, and the athletic trainer. That was it. It was just kind of getting the start of all communication. It was a lot of our communication was on a voicemail system, and you had to figure everything out. You had to just you had to learn who the doctor was that we used for the Elizabethton Twins, and the contacts there and growing everything. And if there was a problem that occurred, whether it was equipment, travel, medical, strength and conditioning, or anything else, it was the athletic trainer's job to figure it out, solve the issue, and move forward at that moment in time. And you're trying to figure out not only to take care and put players in the proper position to have success on the field in return from injury, but all these other things that nobody's taught you about how to do, simple things like, hey, my glove broke. Okay, well, I guess I need to figure out how to restring a glove now. Things like that. And over the time, and I was very fortunate with the Twins that the minor league medical staff at the time was always very good. And you get a lot of this prep in spring training, and they were very giving in information and answering all the questions that I had to put me in a position to have success when I got there. Even though it still feels a little bit overwhelming, relying on my teammates at the time to help me made a big difference.
Yeah, it's funny to hear you mention the glove breaking and restringing a glove. We've actually heard that from a couple of your colleagues across the league that early days, back in the day in the minor leagues, you were doing everything, whether it was health related or just talking to a guy, communicating, or even restringing a glove. So really interesting stories there. When you were first starting in the minor leagues, You mentioned you don't know anything. You really, it's trial by fire. But were there any specific mentors within the Twins organization or in baseball in general, that kind of showed you the ropes and sat down and said, "Hey, Tony, here's how things are going to work here."
Yeah, without question. I think all of us that have done this for a long time have these moments that we've relied on others and teammates that we were around, people in other organizations to help us that we get to learn from, that you develop these relationships. And for me, medically, my first AAA athletic trainer, who later became the head athletic trainer of the Minnesota Twins, Rick McWayne, Dave Prumer, who I worked with up in the big leagues along with Rick, was a huge help. Jimmy Commons was the assistant trainer at the time in the major leagues. And over the years, and helping us and teaching us in spring training, just kind of get-togethers away from the field to talk about the game, to talk about being an athletic trainer, to learn what it's really about, was very influential. Even on the strength and conditioning side, when we started to evolve and build out the S&C program, to Perry Castellanos, who was the head strength coach in the Twins for a long time, to the medical team, to our physicians, Dr. Steves, John Steves, Diane Dahm, Mike Maloney was one of my longtime minor league physicians in Rochester, New York, they were all very gracious in teaching. They wanted us to have success. They wanted us to learn how to do our jobs better. And all these people were very good about teaching you about travel. Back then, the AAA trainer made all the flights. Well, you had to learn about, I'd watch Rick do all this stuff in spring training and these 3-ring binders full of information. Like, what's that for? And they would just sit down. Well, sit down. These are my rental car reservations. We have to do this to get ready to fly in AAA. Where at the time we were in Salt Lake City. And, you start to learn all that. But then you have all these other questions on, baseball operations. So learning from one of my field coordinators, Steve Little, to the general managers of the Twins, Terry Ryan, Bill Smith. Mike Radcliffe was instrumental. He was our scouting director at the time and later became one of the VPs with the Twins. They're always willing to teach you about the game. And I tell younger ATs now, but during my experiences with the Twins, you're always included in discussions. Didn't mean that as a younger that you should speak up in that conversation. You were there to listen and learn more than anything, but they always included you in everything. So you started to learn how, placement on an injured list works, factors that go into it, to players being available for the major league staff, to trade. You start learning the business that baseball goes through and everything else. But you learn in those moments and through those talks about, if I had the opportunity to be in the major leagues, how am I going to present information to my major league manager? How am I going to present information to my general manager to put them in a spot to make the most informed decisions that they can? And then you got to go practice that in the minor leagues with your coaching staff there, and those relationships that you build up with not just your minor league managers, but the pitching coaches and the hitting coaches and your farm directors and everybody else, and combine all this stuff that you learn. And then when it didn't go right, they were willing to teach you and show you how you can do it better the next time. And more importantly, explain why that probably wasn't the preferred method. I just had a lot of great teachers that are around me. And I mean, it's one of those things that also made those huge difference. The amount of people that I've had, not just in my career, but in my life, that have been willing to give to me, to teach me and help me become better as an athletic trainer or just as a person. I mean, it's an immense list, and I'm forever grateful for those people.
Yeah, I think everybody in the league, in the athletic training world, has more than a handful of people who showed them the ropes, and without those mentors, would have been impossible to actually just understand the ins and outs of the day-to-day of what you guys do, which is really interesting. Well, Tony, now that you've been in the big leagues for so long, worked with a couple organizations, I'm sure you have people coming to you for advice, whether it's students or people looking to get into the game. And a lot of our listeners who are students are heading back to school pretty soon to, maybe finish up their degree in athletic training or start their first internship. What advice would you have for those college students looking to break into professional baseball athletic training?
I think the first thing that I always tell everybody is you need to put yourself in a position so if an opportunity arises, you have the ability to take advantage of it. That's through your learning to be an athletic trainer, the textbook, the book work that you're doing, the labs, the hands-on experience. You want to have the opportunity. So, if it's getting an internship, if it's later on getting a position within a professional league, or going to get your master's, being a GA, that you have the skill set and knowledge to take advantage of it. I think that's the first thing. You want to be prepared for that, because you don't know, at the end of the day, much like myself, you never know when the opportunity is going to arise and be presented to yourself to take advantage of. And I think you'll find a lot of us, my peers within the game, that these weren't really our intended career paths. We just we were put in a position where we could take advantage of it, and we loved what we did, and we continue those journeys, because you never know who you're going to meet, how that connection is going to work, and everything else. So that's really the first thing. The second thing that, and I'm sure that you've heard this a lot on the other podcasts with the guys through the games, that throughout the game, is that being willing to be a selfless, open to working as a team, that growth mindedness that you need to have, especially being a good teammate anymore. Our care is, with multidisciplines to take care of our players anymore, whether it's dietitians, S&C, physical therapy, sports science, biomechanists, all the orthos, gen med, all the specialty functions we get in there, chiropractors, massage therapists, you name it. We want to be able to use all those resources. So you need to learn how to be a good teammate within that environment to help our players. And I think also just to be prepared for long hours and long seasons. I don't think it's just baseball specific, but I think of being an athletic trainer in general is we end up having to give a lot of ourselves and the environments that we are in to help others. And it takes a lot of time, and it takes up a lot of time.
Yeah, I think what I've learned from most of you and then men and women across the league in your position is that it's really a position of service. You have to love serving others and working as a team to get people back on the field, and it's definitely a labor of love. There's no doubt about that. One thing that I do want to touch on, before we get into the day-to-day stuff about your role in Pittsburgh, is something really cool. You were the athletic trainer for the National League, one of them, at the 2024 MLB All-Star Game just a couple weeks ago. I want to hear more from you about that experience in general. Was it everything you thought it would be, taking care of the top players in the league? I know it was, typically time you get off. How did it compare to, previous years, or also what you thought, working the All-Star Game might be like?
It was a really exciting time. It's a unique experience. And when I was talking to people about it leading up to it, it's like, these are things that you get to dream of as a kid growing up.
Yeah.
Watching an all-star game and going, how cool would it be to be an all-star? Well, I have limited athletic ability, certainly not at a level that our players, let alone here in Pittsburgh. But when you're on that stage of greatness around you with that many tremendous players, it's exciting as heck to be there, and get to just enjoy the whole experience. My family came with me, and they had a great time. The most fun for me was sitting at the home run derby with my daughter next to me as we were watching it, and next thing you know, Shohei Ohtani just plops down next to us. And, it's just unique experiences that you don't get to really see, feel, or do until you're in an environment like that. And then being able to share it with my family made it extremely special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt about that. Outside of the family time and, seeing all the great players and a unique situation for sure, what are the main responsibilities, for you and your colleagues working the All-Star Game? Is it much different than a regular season game with the Pirates? I know it's a couple of days, home run derby and stuff like that, but how does it compare to what you do on everyday basis with the Pirates?
It's the same, but different. And what I mean by that is we're there to take care of the players there. We're really there to make sure they get back to their organization healthy and in one piece. Mm-hmm. We need to take care of the players, whatever their needs are, but it's different in that it's not as structured, and we're not as involved in the day-to-day care with players that we're not around. We're there to do, I don't want to say the minimum, but we're there to do the basics. We're there to implement any of the programs they come with through their team's medical staff has for them. And we're there to carry on what's been done to just get them ready to play play the game, go out in the pregame and do everything. It's just not the same day-to-day management of injuries and treatment programs and recovery programs that we have on a day-to-day basis when we're with our own clubs as we're all out there competing. So in that way, it's different, but our focus doesn't change, and we're there in case something bad happens to provide care, do all the right things and evaluate properly. Certainly down in Texas, we'd be able to use Dr. Meister for anything, but that's really it. It's just really laid back and calm compared to some of our normal days where it can be pretty hectic and you're just on the go going from one thing to the other, especially if it's a day game. You just played a night game the night before and just kind of that flow. It's a complete, in one way, it's a little bit unsettling because it's just like throws your whole day off. It's not the same routine and schedule. And I think, as you know, Sam, most of us are become very routine oriented in this game, but we just know when we just have this flow of the day, and that's what we do because that's all we do every day.
Yeah, and one thing I'm really interested to hear from you about is, so I know everybody has their own programs with their own players. When you're in charge of the well-being and healthcare of another team's player, do you have a lot of conversations with those other athletic trainers across the league about their players as the All-Star game approaches? If they're dealing with something or if there's something they want you to know, do you guys kind of communicate with that? I know when we spoke with Tomas Vera about the World Baseball Classic, that's a lot of games. There was a lot of communication with other athletic trainers across the league to make sure that the proper care was given to those players. So do you communicate with other teams as leading up to the All-Star game?
Absolutely. What we did was a spreadsheet is sent out to each individual, all the National League clubs, and I'm sure on the American League side they did the exact same. And this is done every year. This isn't unique to just the All-Star game this year. That we collect all the information on any current injuries that the clubs are willing to share that they're getting treatment on. Obviously, we want to protect the individual's privacy and everything like that, but anything they do, what their routine is. And basically what we find is what the other ATs in the league do is, this player we've been working on this. Here's some of the things that treatment wise that we would like to see happen if he asks for it. And here's how we've been doing it. This is maybe some of the modalities they've been using. If they're getting some tape applied somehow, like kinesio tape or something, generally we'll get a video of how they like to apply it so we can replicate that as best we can to keep everything as consistent as we can for the players. And sometimes that results in us having to have maybe an additional phone call with the AT on the other team just to find out a little bit more if we have questions or everything else. There's a lot of communication. Those of us amongst Major League Baseball as athletic trainers and part of PBATs, I think we all have a great respect for each other. And we're all generally, we know each other quite well from years and years of interactions and stuff. And we just work well together. We rely on each other to help us all the time. These are some of the things you learn in the minor leagues coming up when, the other team's minor league athletic trainer is just as important to help you as you are to help them because there's not a lot of us at that time in the minor leagues. You just learn to rely on each other. We just help. We're just there to carry out, but the communication of it's a key. So we just put the spreadsheet together so we have a reference sheet and then just follow up as needed. And our players are really good nowadays at explaining what their needs are, how they do things. And it's actually a fun time to learn as to, well, why are you doing this and everything else? Because there's another opportunity to learn something you might not know.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's really interesting. And obviously the players are an asset to all teams and have to be taken care of. So it's really cool to hear the communication that goes on across the league. Shifting gears a bit, Tony, you've been with the Pirates for 4 years now. We'll get into some more of your day-to-day here soon. But someone with the Pirates who's very important across the league, and especially in Pittsburgh, and a previous guest on the show is Todd Tomzik, the director of sports medicine over there. Todd's been in Pittsburgh for a long time now. Awesome guy, very talented athletic trainer. Talk about working with him, his impact on the city and the club, and what it's like getting to just spend time with Todd every day and learn and grow with him as a staff.
Well, it's a lot of fun being around Todd every day. I enjoy my time with him quite a bit. I believe I'm probably one of the older athletic trainers in the league now. It's amazing how fast time flies.
Yeah.
But Todd's right in that boat with me as far as being old. Is that I think the first time Todd and I actually met each other was 1999 in the Appalachian League when he was working
Wow.
with the Cleveland. I think he was in Burlington and I was in Elizabethton. And over those years, we've crossed paths in AA, AAA, certainly in the major leagues when he was an assistant with the Dodgers. And then when he came over to the Pirates, we didn't see him as much, but we'd see him in spring training all the time. If he traveled, generally he'd like to stay in Bradenton. But, with that though, he's done it for a long time. I've certainly been around for a long time. So for me, what's fun and the impact I get out of it is our conversations and debates we have amongst ourselves on how to take care of players, how to rehab them back, treatments, or, when we get to be aggressive and include our docs and how can we be. There are actually a lot of fun conversations because we have so much different experience that we can draw from over the years to kind of challenge each other, to get us to grow, to learn, and make each other better. It's just a fun time. It creates a lot of growth opportunities to think of things differently than what you're accustomed to. For all the 23 years I spent with the Twins, you become accustomed in a little bit to there's a certain framework, if you will, of how your decisions get made based on, your physicians, the other staff you're with, because there's so much familiarity. You're there. And then when you get to go to like a different organization, certainly my time in Oakland and then here at the Pirates, what that framework that you had is challenged in a constructive way because others do things differently, but you end up getting the same result. So then you get to kind of mold all that together. And those conversations Todd and I have, like I said, it just helped me learn in a different way and a different level that helped me to become better every day as an athletic trainer. And it's a lot of fun. Certainly he's been here. He's highly thought of within the city of Pittsburgh, certainly in the Pirates organization. And he's an integral part of what we try to accomplish on a day-to-day basis in the Pirates organization and taking care of our players and keeping them on the field.
Mm-hmm. And to piggyback off your comments about kind of your movement of a couple of organizations over the past handful of years or so, one thing I'm really fascinated by is the growth of the profession of athletic training and sports medicine, not only in terms of knowledge and information and treatment, but also the size and development of athletic training staffs across the league. So I'd love to hear from you about, how things have changed, take it back to maybe your first year in the big leagues in Minnesota compared to now. What really stands out to you in terms of changes in positive growth for the profession?
Well, I think the size of the staffs have gotten, I'm not going to say like too large. But they're big, but they become necessary.
Yeah.
The amount of manual therapy that we do on our players on a day-to-day basis, I think one of the biggest increases that I've seen over my time, it's not that we weren't hands-on with our players before. It's just more so that I think our skills of athletic trainers have really evolved, and we've been very much to embrace all these other skill sets and apply them, into our day-to-day routines with our players in practice. And those skill sets, when you're talking about manual therapy inputs, they take a lot of time, and you say, well, you only have 26 players and, how many people do you need? Well, we can range in treatment times with players from a half hour to 45 minutes just in prep work. And that's not talking some of the more intricate stuff that we're going to do with our injured players where we're working on rehab and everything else. And you need personnel to be able to handle that. So I think that's been one of the big changes that we've seen over the years. Because really when I started, it was Rick, Dave, and I, and I didn't travel. I stayed home and did all our long-term rehabs. And then eventually when I was the first assistant in the big leagues, it was just Dave and I would go on the road and there were just two of us to manage the team. Dave would be gone being the head athletic trainer and talking with Gardy at the time, Ron Gardenhire, our manager, the GM. So he was in and out of the training room. So there's one person essentially taking care of the roster, and our players deserve better. They deserve better attention. They deserve better longer duration treatments and inputs to stay on the field. They're going to perform at a high level. And that's one of the things. And it's a great change. It's been something that provides a lot more opportunities for certainly athletic trainers and physical therapists and S&C and everybody else to assist in this and create rules. But in the end, we're all trying to keep all the players we can on the field because it's a big responsibility in keeping them healthy. But it's not just players out there trying to compete every day. I mean, really, you're enabling all these players' childhood dreams of being a professional baseball player, and they're being rewarded for all the work that they've put into their career so far by being on that field. And that significance is never lost on me. And you want to do your best for everybody. And sometimes it's certainly taken more staff anymore and much better inputs and uses of, like I said, the manual therapies, modalities, and whatever we have at our disposal.
Mm-hmm. And Tony, last thing I want to talk to you about today, as someone with so much experience in the game, you've talked about, Rick McQuain, Dave Prumer, Perry, a ton of guys with the Twins who you came up with and worked with for so long. Awesome people over there. I'm sure you had such good relationships with them. Talk about those relationships, from all your years in baseball and how important those are, because obviously knowing the right people and being connected with great people is something that can really catapult a career in the right direction. So talk a bit about that and maybe your advice for those younger athletic trainers, starting their first internship or grinding through the minor leagues and the key of, keeping those relationships alive as you move across your career.
Well, it's interesting, all the people I was with the Twins, I think I've been very fortunate too, that I, even though it was a very short time in Oakland, was just one season and was even shorter because of COVID, I was surrounded by a lot of great people. Certainly Oakland's medical staff with, Nick, Jeff, and Brian, they were very gracious to me. They were open and teaching me their ways. Certainly the minor league staff were very teaching. And the coaching staff was great. The front office was great. There were so many great people that I got to be that it was very comforting. And then the transition over here into Pittsburgh was also very welcoming with great people, and that you're surrounded by a lot of incredible people that are giving, not just on, the medical performance team, but with our coaching staff, with our clubhouse operations, with our front office and everybody, it's tremendous. So to create those type of relationships though are vital. I just mentioned how I've known Todd since 1999, Nick Paparizza, who's now with Minnesota as their head AT, I knew since Double-A, so that would have probably been, 2003. I got to meet up with Jeff Collins when he got to the big leagues through Dave Prumer, because they both went to Southern Illinois. You start learning all these people and everyone else, and I know I'm leaving off a lot of my other peers that I've came up with in the minor leagues that I have great relationships with, that I look back on fondly and I appreciate, because we've all helped each other at times, different ways over the years to become better or get through a solution in the minor leagues during games. But those relationships are really important, because you never know who's going to be in a way, who's going to be looking out for you.
Yeah.
How I got to Oakland was because of my relationships with Nick. And not just a one-on-one relationship with Nick, but all of us established a reputation within our industry and within the game, and how you establish that and how you maintain that and how your interactions are with others determine how much willing people are going to want you in their organization if an opportunity is there, if there's a position open. So I was very thankful for that for Nick, but kind of going back a little bit, that you need to be prepared for those opportunities when they present themselves to take advantage of them. That applies to all of us as we continue to grow and learn as an athletic trainer. But those kind of things are good, because those are become almost like some lifetime bonds in the minor leagues when you're developing these relationships with the other athletic training staffs that you're going to get to interact with. And they're vital. And I don't think that just applies to professional baseball. I think that would work in college settings. I'm certainly in the other pro leagues. That those things could just make a big difference for you down the road. Not only is it somebody else that can be a sounding board to you to challenge some of your assumptions and ideas that you're having, to say, hey, we actually kind of look at it this way in our organization. We think like, oh, well, those are those opportunities to continue to grow and learn. but to have a little bit of a support system that's not just, within that network that you're seeing every day for who knows what will transpire down the road.
Yeah. No, clearly you see the value in people around you and are more than grateful, it sounds like, for all the experiences and relationships you have. And to end today, I do want to give you a couple minutes here. We spoke about Todd Tomzik with the Pirates, Rafael Freitas, who is the head athletic trainer there. But I want to give you a couple minutes maybe to recognize the other people within the organization who help make your guys' jobs easier every day.
Yeah, we're probably one of the smaller staffs in the game, which is fine. We're staffed at an appropriate level for our players, but it's not just Todd, Rafa, and I that take care of our players. Drew Scott's up here. He's our minor league medical coordinator. He kind of oversees the minor leagues a little bit from afar with more of a focus on AAA and AA at this time. And he helps us at home with our game coverage and our day-to-day at home, and also assists with the long-term rehabs that we leave behind when we travel here at PNC Park. We have Seth Steinauer is our physical therapist. We also use Otis Fitzgerald as a PT for us when we go on the road to assist us in our care. Our two strength coaches, Terrence Brannick and Adam Vish, are integral as we progress people through the different stages of return to play and helping us put their on and trying to create some peak performance for our players on the field. And we have two dietitians, Hillary Ake and Stephanie Holmes, that help us and kind of really dominate our nutrition space for us. And our massage therapist, Sarah Hubble, who's integral and is extremely important in really diving into soft tissue recovery and managing those players that need more time than we can provide as we work through all of our players on a day-to-day basis. And our physicians are very vital to us, led by Dr. Pat DeMeo, Dr. Franco, Dr. Frank, and Dr. Ved. And we have a lot of other physicians as well that contribute greatly to our care of our players. It's a big team overall. It's not just the athletic trainers, it's all of us combined that provide a high level of care for our players that we take pride in and want to provide for everybody to stay on the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely an awesome group there in Pittsburgh. Some of the best in the game for sure. Well, Tony, to wrap up today's episode, on each show, we finish with a quick Q&A segment called Extra Bases. So I'm going to run through 4 quick questions and let you share some insight about athletic training and baseball with our listeners. So we will kick it off at first base. What is your favorite athletic training room to work in the big leagues when you guys are on the road?
Well, now it's Atlanta. The new stadium there. It's a very well laid out clubhouse. It's very spacious, and the training room is very nice. It's big. You don't have to worry about where are you going to put your trunks. You got plenty of tables and spaces to work for all of our administrative type duties that we have, and take care of the players. It's a great facility. They did a great job laying that out on the visiting side, and it's enjoyable to go to.
Yeah, I think that's the number one answer across the league. So whoever designed that, George and the guys down there, great work by them. Moving on to second base here. This is interesting to hear from you as you just witnessed the All-Star game from right up close. What's your favorite big league stadium to watch a game from the dugout?
Well, I've been fortunate to have been to all 30 of the major league stadiums currently. Dodger Stadium's impressive, certainly Fenway, Wrigley Field, Yankee Stadium. I was very fortunate to spend a lot of time in Minnesota at Target Field, which is a gorgeous stadium. If nobody's been there, the summers are awesome in Minnesota, and it's a great place to go. But I'm a little biased. I grew up a Pirates fan. I grew up close to here. I spent a lot of my youth going to Three Rivers Stadium, but even when I came as on the opposing team to Pittsburgh, PNC Park is one of my favorites. It's we're on the third base dugout. So when I look out at the field, center field, you're seeing the Clemente Bridge going across the river. Right across the field is just an incredible background of the city of Pittsburgh over right field. And it's a gorgeous view to watch the games in. It's pretty impressive for those that haven't been to PNC Park.
Yeah, for anyone who's considering going, I can vouch for that. I think it's one of the maybe not underrated anymore, but the views there are absolutely incredible. So definitely agree with you there. Moving on to third base, outside of baseball and your career and what you do, you guys do travel so much. But do you have a favorite city to visit while you're on the road?
I probably have a tie. I like Boston and Washington, D.C. I enjoy the history that those two cities have to offer, and I like to take part in that, especially when we have an off day in those cities. To go and explore and learn something other than athletic training, and they just have a lot to offer. It's just really unique going to those cities and kind of wandering around. In Boston, you have so much old history, through our country, and certainly in D.C. with all the government there and the Smithsonian's. It's just impressive. You can get lost for days just learning about things, going through museums. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, two of the best walking cities. So I'm sure you guys get some time early in the mornings to do that before you head off to the stadium. Well, headed to home plate. Last question for today. When you came up, or maybe even your first year with Pittsburgh, or whenever that might be, did you ever have a welcome to the big leagues moment at any point in your career?
Yes, I think for me, it was learning what the major leagues was like, and this is while I was in AAA actually. In 2006, I got called up to be added to the staff. Back then we could expand the rosters up to 40 players if you so desired. And during the time, they'd usually try to bring up to deal with all the influx of extra players, a AAA athletic trainer, a lot of times, or one of the other minor league guys, and an extra coach to help, throw batting practice and all that kind of fun stuff. But I had just lost to Toledo in the International League Championship Series, and I got back to Rochester, and I flew with our players to join the big club up in Boston at Fenway. And it never really dawned on me to what it was like to be in a big league stadium. I mean, certainly we all go as fans, you see the crowds and everything else, but at Fenway, it's pretty unique the way the clubhouse is laid up. On the visiting side, you have to walk down some stairs tunnel underneath the first level concourse. Then you walk upstairs, and then you kind of pop up into the dugout. And one thing that's unique about that walk in that tunnel is everybody that's been to Fenway in the history of the game has had to walk through that. Mm-hmm. Like, wow, that's pretty special. And then as I'm coming up for a night game in Fenway for the first time ever, I'd never been to Fenway before. And certainly I was out on the field for batting practice and stuff like that. But going up and you just start to hear the crowd, you can see the game going on, and then just feel the energy of what a true major league game is like when you're in a dugout. It's like, oh, well, this is different. This isn't like being in the minor leagues. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was just eye-opening. It's like, wow, this will be fun to do if that opportunity ever happens. It was like, this is what people live their lives to do, certainly on the field or in the dugout or any other the support staff that we have. And it's like, wow, this is pretty special. And for me, that's the one I look back on the most, is that opportunity that I had in AAA to go up and experience is like, that could actually be something to keep working for. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty unique. And that's the one that really kind of stands out for me.
Yeah, I always say that athletic trainers like yourself are in such a unique position where you're actually one of the few people outside of the players in the dugout for every game, which is really amazing and really cool story there to hear from you. Well, Tony, thanks so much for joining the show. We really appreciate your time, your dedication to PBATS, the profession of athletic training, and wish you and your staff there in Pittsburgh nothing but the best of luck the second half of the season here.
Thank you, Sam. This was a lot of fun to do, and look forward to seeing you down the road.
Thank you for listening to the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. For more information about athletic training and sports medicine, visit pbats.com.